Aaron and Moses, these were brothers who were leading the children of Israel from Egypt to Canaan. But now Paul writes in the book of 1 Corinthians chapter 10, where we read from verse 1. I want you to follow this closely as we go by. From verse 1, the Bible says, moreover, brethren, I would not that you should be ignorant. 1 Corinthians chapter 10 from verse 1. Moreover, brethren, I would not that you should be ignorant, how that our fathers were under the cloud and passed through the sea, and were all baptized into Moses in the cloud and in the sea, and did all eat the spiritual meat, and did all drink the same spiritual drink, for they drink from the spiritual rock that followed them, and that rock was Christ. This was a very powerful experience. Baptized into Moses, crossed the Red Sea. They all ate manna. They were all under the pillar of cloud during the day, and they were all under the pillar of fire during the night. But verse 5 said, But with many of them God was not well pleased, for they were overthrown in the wilderness. Now these things were our examples to the intent we should not lust after evil, that they also lusted. That we should not lust after the evil, as they also lusted. Now the question is, what exactly did they do? Now, when you go from verse 6 all the way to verse 9, there were quite a number of things which they did. But today we want to focus on verse 8. A few days ago, I was focusing on verse 6. You can actually follow this on YouTube. There is a sermon which I have done, which is called Balaam, the Fallen Prophet, the Champion of Ecumenism. These were the stories which were happening in the wilderness, which led to so many of them being destroyed. In other words, they were not just destroyed, but they were catalysts which led to the destruction. Now, verse 7 says, Neither be ye idolaters, as were some of them, as it is written, the people sat down to eat and drink and rose up to play. They sat down, they ate, they drink, and they rose up to play. This was a very wonderful experience. They sat down to eat and drink, they rose up to play. They sat down to eat and drink, they rose up to play. They sat down to eat and drink, and they rose up to play. Now the question is, what's so special about what they were doing? Sitting down to eat and drink, and then been energized, and they've been invigorated with the food, and they rose up to play. And now the question is, what exactly were they playing? That, Paul will say that, because it's written, they sat down to eat and drink. Now the question is, what exactly were they eating? What exactly were they drinking? This sounds very interesting. Now, verse 11, verse 12 says, Now all these things happened unto them for ensembles, and they were written for our admonition, upon whom the ends of the world are come. Wherefore let him that thinketh he standeth take heed lest he fall. So in other words, sometimes you may think you are standing, but you may fail to make it. Remember, God was not well pleased with many of them, even though they were baptized, even though they ate manna, even though they crossed the Red Sea, even though they had a tangible experience with God, but that was not enough to save them. It actually means that sometimes, you may be in the church for a very long time, but that does not guarantee salvation. Mm-hmm. Sometimes you may have actually led so many people to Jesus Christ, but you may fall along the way. So now the question is, what really happened in this story? The Bible says in the book of Exodus chapter 32 from verse 1. Exodus chapter 32. Let's jump on to Exodus chapter 32 from verse 1. It happened that, people were waiting for Moses. Moses had gone into the mountain, and now he had taken very long time with God there, because you cannot tell God the time. You cannot rush when you are before God. You need to be calm. So Moses is in the presence of the Lord, but something is happening at the foot of the mountain. And, it happened that, there is a struggle. People are no longer happy because there is a delay there. As they are no longer happy, The Bible says in Exodus chapter 32 from verse 1, and when the people saw that Moses delayed to come down out of Mount, the people gathered themselves together unto Aaron and said, Up, make us gods. We shall go before us. As for this Moses, the man who brought us up out of the land of Egypt, we wot not what is become of him. So now this was a command. When you study, you realize that, people sat down in their camps. Not everyone went to Aaron, but they send their judges, they send their leaders, they send their representatives, and they say, Aaron, this is our demand. Make us gods. For this Moses that has led us out of the land of Egypt, we don't know what has become of him. Therefore, you need to do something, Aaron. It happens that, when a delay has taken place, people tend to be tired. Moses is in the mountain. He has delayed. He has led them out of Egypt. God is giving him some instructions. God is giving him the 10 commandments, which he has read on Exodus chapter 25. God says, come up now that I can give you these commandments. And before he came down with the tables of stone, there is a great rebellion in the camp. It's just like now that Jesus is delayed coming. We are tired of waiting. We've been waiting since our forefathers. This Jesus, when is he going to come? Things are changing. Now we are beginning to invent so many things, rewriting the Bible, changing the pillars of our faith, changing our understanding because, Jesus is delayed. But now, you need to understand something interesting about this. Who exactly was Aaron? Aaron was the brother of Moses. In fact, he's the old brother. Aaron was the high priest, is the gentleman that will wear the robes. Aaron had a good command that when he speaks, they will listen. Aaron, he was actually the prophet of Moses. He was the spokesperson of Moses. And then Aaron is the one he was the worship leader. So now Aaron was speaking on behalf of God. So in other words, he was the representative of God, that when they look at Aaron, they are looking at God. He is not God, but the voice that comes when he is speaking on behalf of God as a representative of God. He was the high priest. So the high priest ordered the people. On verse 2, and Aaron said unto them, break off the golden earrings which are in the ears of your wives and of your sons and of your daughters, and bring them unto me. Now, people have demanded a God. Mark this, Aaron did not want to make a God. But Aaron schemed. And he said, let me do something which will make these people to think. Let me see if I can actually poke on their pride. They will not want to remove their earrings. They will not want to part with their gold. So now Aaron say, can you bring your earrings? And the people say, aha, this is what we have been waiting for. Verse 3, and all the people break off the golden earrings which were in their ears and brought them to Aaron. Oh, the scheme of Aaron had failed. There is a revolt in the camp. The revolt is that Moses has delayed coming. And as this revolt is taking place, Aaron is trying to use his scheme to quell the revolt. And now the people want Aaron to make gods. But Aaron knew that this is not the most ideal thing, and he does not want to do that. But there is also a problem in Aaron. He's trying to find out, what can I do to deal with these people? Outside that which God said we should do. He's thinking of a scheme on how to sort problems out. Now verse 4 says, and he received, now they've brought their earrings, and he received them at their hand, and he fashioned it with a graving tool. After he had made it a molten calf, and they said, these be thy gods, O Israel, which brought thee out of the land of Egypt. Now, Aaron knows this very well, that there is a God. This God spoke to them at Mount Sinai. This God was speaking to Moses, and he was speaking on behalf of that God. But now Aaron is saying, he has just made the calf. And they said, this is your God that brought you out of the land of Egypt. Now, by the way, remember, the worship leader is the one who is leading, and is the one who is making a pronunciation. Now, verse 5 says, and when Aaron saw it, that people were happy, he built an altar before it. And Aaron made a proclamation and said, tomorrow is a feast of the Lord. Now the question, which God was he referring to? He is referring to the God that he has made. And this God which he has made, now he's saying, this is the God that brought you out of the land of Egypt. So tomorrow is a feast. Verse 6 says, tomorrow it come. Now, verse 6. And they rose up early on the morrow, and offered burnt offerings, and brought peace offerings. And the people sat down to eat and to drink, and rose up to play. This was a great celebration. They could see their gods, and they believed this is the God that has brought us out of the land of Egypt. And they were very happy that, this God has been made out of our earrings, out of our gold. And, we contributed to this God. And by the way, and it's a belief in their mind now, this God is the one that is brought out of Egypt. By the way, the demons had taken over. Aaron is now possessed. The whole camp is now possessed. Now the devil is being worshipped. So they sat down to eat and to drink, and they rose up to play. Now the question, what exactly is happening with Aaron? The man has been left with the responsibility to look after the people. The man is left with the responsibility to represent God in the camp. When people look at Aaron, they were supposed to see the God of heaven, because his dressing was actually he was reflecting the God of heaven. When they look at him, his dressing, they were supposed to remember the 10 commandments. But there is something which is happening here. Aaron is now leading people to worship idols. What exactly is happening? When we learn from the book Patriarchs and Prophets 320 paragraph 4, it says, it was Aaron who changed the glory into the similitude of an ox. The glory of God, he changed it into a similitude of ox. He to whom God had committed the government of the people in the absence of Moses was found sanctioning their rebellion. It's very unfortunate if you have got a leader like Aaron. He is supposed to lead people to their God. But instead, he decided to lead in rebellion. In the absence of Moses, he is supposed to direct people to God, but he sanctioned rebellion in the camp. Say, the Lord was very angry with Aaron to have destroyed him. Deuteronomy chapter 9, verse 20. But this is the painful thing about God. But in answer to the earnest intercession of Moses, in other words, as Moses came down realizing that what Aaron had done, and he realized that, this actually is the end of Aaron, Moses pleaded with God. And what did God do? Because of, and in penitence and humiliation for his great sin, he was restored to the favor of God. Thank God for Moses. Aaron is restored. But the question is, are all restored? No. 3,000 will die. But Aaron, because he repented of his sin. Now the question is, what exactly was the problem? Aaron was the leader, but the problem was he was very weak. And his weakness costed so much. Now it says in the book Testimonies, volume 3, page 293, paragraph 3, Aaron was a man of amiable disposition, whom God selected to stand with Moses and speak for him. In short, to be mouthpiece of Moses. God might have chosen Aaron as a leader. By the way, Aaron was older than Moses. Therefore, Aaron could have been chosen as a leader. But he who is acquainted with the hearts, who understands character, knew that Aaron was yielding and lacked moral courage to stand in defense of the right under all circumstances. You know, to defend the truth. You need to be able to defend the truth under all circumstances. Be it cold, be it hot, whether people like it or whether they don't, whether it's popular or unpopular, you need to be in a position to defend the truth in all circumstances. But the men lacked courage irrespective of consequences. Aaron's desire to have the goodwill of the people sometimes led him to commit great wrongs. Desire to have the goodwill of people. You know, there are people who want to please people, and you want people to speak well of you. Oh, that one is a good man. Oh, he's a good man. He doesn't fight us. He doesn't do something which is contrary. He always do what we want. He consults us. He tells us what to do. He asks us, and he's a very good man like Aaron. He too frequently yielded to their entreaties, and in so doing dishonored God. In other words, Aaron's God could change at any given time. If people are demanding something, he would rather go with people. If God is saying something, and if he doesn't interrupt with people, he would rather do what God says. He will fit in any environment. Says, if Aaron had the courage to stand for the right, irrespective of consequences, he could have prevented that apostasy. Now, Aaron was not able to stand for the right in all circumstances. And the children of God who represent God, they don't know whether they will stand for the truth in whatever situation. That's why Revelation Chapter 2 verse 10 makes it very clear. Be thou faithful unto death, and I'll give you a crown. It's only those who are faithful, who are truthful, who remain consistent to God, to the God they believe. You know, Aaron was a popular man. He loved the praises of men more than the praises of God. He loved his position of honor from the congregation. He was too weak to make an informed decision and stand by it. You know, he was a leader who could be controlled by circumstances. He could be molded. Whatever people want would do it. You know, this is the reason why sometimes, you know, people are liked. You know, you can be an elder and you become so popular. Or you can be a deacon, you become so popular. You can be a manager, you become so popular. The reason why you are popular, it's not that you are doing things very well. It is because you are a puppet. Whatever people say you should do, you do that. Wherever people say you should go, you go there. You are liked so much, not because God loves you, but simply because you are an obstacle to the truth. And those people who are unconverted, they use you. And Aaron was a catalyst for destruction. So as Moses confronted Aaron, Aaron decided to give a false account to Moses. You know, it says in the book Testimonies, volume 3, page 298, paragraph 2. For they said unto me, this is Aaron, make us gods, which shall go before us. For as for this Moses, the man that brought us up out of the land of Egypt, we want not what is become of him. Remember, this is chapter 32 of Exodus. And I said unto them, whosoever has any gold, let him break it off. So they gave it me. Then I cast it into the fire, and there came out this calf. Now the question is, did the calf just come out? No. Aaron was a liar. There is nothing so bad as having a leader who is a liar. Lie is a tool of the devil. and Aaron is lying, it says, Aaron would have Moses think that some wonderful miracle had transpired, their golden ornaments into the shape of a calf. He did not relate to Moses that he, with other workmen, had wrought out this image. You know, the work of God can never be preserved with lying. If there is something which is detestable in the eyes of God, are people who lie. If there is something which is abomination, an abominable thing is to allow your mouth to be a witness to lies, especially if you are serving the things of God. Now Aaron, because of his scheme, he wants Moses to believe that, you know, he threw the gold in the fire and then suddenly this calf just appeared. That was Aaron, the high priest. You know, because of Aaron's influence, people had, the camp now had a different perception of Moses. Now they started comparing the two, Moses and Aaron. Which one is better? We are for Aaron. Some will say, no, I'm for Moses. No, Aaron is a good man. Why is it good? Because this man who do exactly what we tell him to do. Therefore, whatever he commands, it's easier to do because he's so good. It says in volume 3, Testimonies, page 300, paragraph 2, "This said Aaron, without hesitation or shame." Without hesitation or shame. The men said, "These be thy gods, O Israel, which brought thee out of the land of Egypt." Now, the question is, Aaron, didn't you know that there is a God of heaven? He knew. But why are you saying that? Because that's what people want to hear. But why are you saying that? To preserve my position. Why are you saying that? My friend, this is what people want. Let's say that. Did people argue that this is not our God? No. Because carnal mind is enmity with God. Carnal mind will enjoy rebellion. Aaron influenced the children of Israel to go greater. Aaron influenced the children of Israel to go to greater length in idolatry than had entered their minds. In other words, the people didn't want to rebel as Aaron did. The people, there is a possibility that they didn't want to sacrifice to the idol. No. But because it says Aaron influenced them to go greater. You know, the problem is this, you know, the moment you open the door for the demon and the demon controls you, you cannot be limited. You go where you don't want to go, because now the spirit that is controlling you is way, way above you, and you don't understand this spirit will take you far, far, far than where you want to go. That's why you find that, you know, you need to guard against all forms of compromise. The moment you compromise on one thing, you have opened the door to another, until it kills you. They were no longer troubled lest the burning glory like flaming fire upon the mount had consumed their leader. They thought they had a general who just suited them, and they were ready to do anything that he suggested. They were ready to do whatever Aaron said. And said, this general suits us. He does exactly what we want. You know, we are heading for general conference very soon. In fact, you find that, you know, end of the year we'll finish every time we do elections. People will try to find out what suits them. What's the most ideal thing? Who is the best leader? And now they will make their preference. It says, when Moses saw the idolatry of Israel, and his indignation was so aroused at their shameful forgetfulness of God that he threw down the tables of stone and broke them in anger. Moses broke those tables. Now listen, Aaron stood meekly by, bearing the censure of Moses with commendable patience. The people were charmed with Aaron's lovely spirit and were disgusted with the rashness of Moses. So they will say to Moses, what's the fuss? What's the problem with you? Yeah, it's just a calf. Look at Aaron. Why do you behave like that? What's the story? Why do you do such a thing? Moses is disgusted with what is happening. But Aaron is very calm. Doesn't matter, man. We'll sort it out tomorrow. It doesn't matter. Now the question is, how do we view sin? But now that's not an issue. You realize that's not an issue for today. But you find that, as for Aaron and Moses, now this is what is happening in the camp, that, the camp is now making a decision. It's better that we should have Aaron than have Moses. Nah, we can't do it with Moses anymore. Aaron understands the people. He understands how to deal with problems. But he's in rebellion to God and he does what you want. Yeah, he does what you want. But that's contrary to what God says. But you know what? That's what we want. We've got equal rights as well. This is our preference. So when you compare the two, Aaron was very gentle and patient, very tolerant. He was a people pleaser. He was a follower of people. He had no stamina to resist evil. He was very dignified man, and people loved Aaron. But Moses, he was a no-nonsense man. He had a high regard for the commandments of God. By the way, he had spent so much time with God, so he understood the holiness of God. He is the gentleman who, when he was called out of, he sacrificed the whole Egypt that he can choose to suffer with the children of God. So to him, the glory of this world was nothing. The experience of Moses prepared him to make such decisions. So he was hated by all. Many people didn't love him because of his understanding, because of his stand with God. When you read from Patriarchs and Prophets 2:45 paragraph 4, it says regarding Moses' character, Moses was fit to take preeminence among the great on earth. He was fit to be the king of Egypt. He had that opportunity. He was fit for the highest position on earth, to shrine in the courts of the most glorious kingdom and to sway the scepter of its power. His intellectual greatness distinguished him above the great men of all ages. As historian, as poet, as philosopher, general of armies and legislator, he stands without a peer. In other words, Moses was incomparable in all the things of the earth. Yet with the world before him, he had the moral strength to refuse the flattering prospects of wealth and greatness and fame, choosing rather to suffer the affliction with the people of God than to enjoy the pleasures of sin for a season. Moses had a full understanding. If people will like you today, it does not mean they will like you tomorrow. If you choose to go by the flow today, it will only be today, but tomorrow they will revolt against you. Yes. It's better to follow what God says, because what God says will stand forever. So Moses is making a decision that, God has called me. I would rather stick with God rather than to do what people say. When God is calling us for leadership, when God is calling us for guidance, when God is calling us to take responsibility, He is expecting us to live by thus says the Lord. This is the only thing that has eternal life. But if we decided to follow any other way, we are going to sink, because it will not go far. As for this Aaron, when he looked at Moses, he didn't like Moses. Aaron was not happy with Moses because he believed that Moses did not understand people. If Moses could understand people better, we will not have these problems in the camp. There were problems in the camp of Israel. There were problems right from the beginning. As they left Goshen, it was problem until the day they crossed into Canaan, and the problems continued until they went into exile. There were problems in the camp. And then, Aaron will reason that, we could actually have a better way to resolve these problems. To invent another way. Volume 3, 98, paragraph 3, that's Testimonies, says, Aaron had thought that Moses had been too unyielding to the wishes of the people. He said, listen, you are too strict, Moses. Allow people to do some things at least. You can't be so rigid. He thought that if Moses had been less firm, less decided at times, and that if he had made a compromise with the people and gratified their wishes, he would have had less trouble, and there would have been a more peace and harmony in the camp of Israel. He therefore had been trying this new policy. So it was a policy which he was inventing that, if I allow people to do what they want, maybe probably I can control them better. But he didn't know that, by allowing people to do what they want, you have opened the door for demons. Do you know there is nothing called democracy in church? That's a myth. There is nothing called democracy. It's not what people want, it's what God says. Amen. We worship a God that declares. When he declares that which is declared, remember, God is a God of love. So whatever God says is for our good. So we don't make a decision that, let's agree with God to do this. The moment you decide to do your own things, God says, thou shalt not have any other gods before me. You have decided as a God yourself. Therefore you can go and do your own things, and the children of God will do that which God says. Says, and there would have been more peace. He says, he therefore had been trying this new policy. He carried out his natural temperament by yielding to the wishes of the people to save dissatisfaction and preserve their goodwill, and thereby prevent a rebellion which he thought would certainly come if he did not yield to their wishes. But unfortunately, rebellion continued. When you go right at the final stop, 26,000 died. Rebellion continued in the camp. You realize that even as they were journeying, sometimes the earth had to open to swallow people like Korah and Dathan. It was all because of rebellion. Rebellion will continue because the devil is not arrested. All those things were there, but the character of God was to be vindicated. God was to be sanctified in the camp. Says a new order of things had come, and they were pleased with Aaron and pleased with themselves. They thought if Moses had only been amiable and mild as Aaron, what peace and harmony would have prevailed in the camp of Israel. There's something called liberality, and there's something called conservatism. These terms are very interesting. They may mean different things to different people, but there's something which is very important. I got this from Great Controversy, page 522, paragraph 1, looking at these two characters, Moses and Aaron. By the cry, liberality men are blinded to the devices of their adversary, while he is all the time working steadily for the accomplishment of his objective. As he succeeds in supplanting the Bible by human speculation, the law of God is set aside. God says, thou shalt not bow down to idols. They set aside that law to bow down to idols. By that, instead of serving God, they actually went away from God. The things of God we need to hold with care. The things of God we need to be serious. The things of God we need to be committed. We cannot afford to be less committed. Sometimes we think that, we are free, when in actual fact we are in bondage. Because the moment you say you are free, that you don't need to worry about the things of God, it is because the devil is now possessing you. Aaron think he had a solution. He didn't know that he has actually now been possessed by the devil. Sometimes we ask ourselves, we are so popular as leaders. You know, I've been an elder in church for the past I've been an elder in this church for over 10 years. You become so popular that people like you so much. But the question is, why? You know, you could actually be the pleaser of people. And sometimes, you know, you become the favorite. The question is, will God be your favorite? When God look at you, is God happy with you? But now, because of this behavior of Aaron, he made life hard to his family. Because of his behavior of trying to please people, Aaron lost his children. It says in the book of Leviticus chapter 10 from verse 1, and Nadab and Abihu, the sons of Aaron, took neither of them his censer and put... So I'll start again. And Nadab and Abihu, the sons of Aaron, took either of them his censer and put fire thereon, and put incense thereon, and offered strange fire before the Lord, which he commanded them not. And there went out fire from the Lord and devoured them, and they died before the Lord. And Moses said to Aaron, this is it, that the Lord spake, saying, I will be sanctified in them that come nigh me, and before all the people I will be glorified. And Aaron held his peace. Now the question is, what exactly is happening? You know, God says, I should be sanctified. In everything that we are doing, God is supposed to be sanctified. There is a method, there is a way how things are done, but the children of Aaron did not care. They just did whatever they want. You know, God says I should be sanctified in our singing. He should be sanctified in our eating. He should be sanctified in our dressing. He should be sanctified in our communication. God is holy. And the holiness of God should be elevated all the time. You cannot take the things of God casually. Verse 6 says of Leviticus chapter 10, and Moses said to Aaron and to Eleazar and to Ithamar, his sons, uncover your heads, neither rend your clothes, lest you die, lest wrath come upon all the people. But let your brethren, the whole house of Israel, bewail the burning which the Lord had kindled. In other words, God was saying to Aaron, do not be sympathetic to the death of your children. You caused it. You would have actually helped these children. You would have disciplined these children. You would have taken responsibility before they did what they did. But you allowed them to do anyhow. And God had to take the case upon himself. And he did the judgment, which was meant to be done by Aaron when his children were growing. You know, the rebellion we see in this country is not the fault of modernism. It is our own fault. The destruction of our children, most of the times, it is the society that we have built ourselves. It says, but here is seen the result of loose discipline. That's taken from Testimonies, volume 9, page 295. Testimonies, volume 3. As these sons of Aaron had not been educated to respect and reverence the commandments of their father, as they disregarded parental authority, they did not realize the necessity of explicitly following the requirements of God when indulging their appetite for wine when indulging their appetite for wine and while under its exciting stimulus, their reason was beclouded and they could not discern the difference between sacred and common. Contrary to God's express direction, they dishonored him by offering common instead of sacred fire. God visited them with his wrath. Fire went forth from his presence and destroyed them. You know, God says you should not, holy things cannot mix with unholy. These guys, they go into the sanctuary drunk because the sanctuary was like their father's place. Their father was now in charge and in control, and they thought they could do anything. You know, the things of God are so serious. You cannot take it lightly. Neither can you take it as your property. You know, sometimes we get so used that sometimes when we stand before people of God, we think that we own them. No. Sometimes we get so used that when we come to church, we think the church belongs to us. No. This thing is God's. We have been given this privilege. And as we've been given this privilege, it is a call of God that we execute our duties in righteousness as the children of God. Amen. Says in the book Confrontation, page 80, as we wrap up, God gave explicit directions how every part of his service should be conducted, that all connected with his service, sacred worship might be in accordance with his holy character. There is explicit direction on everything we do in the church of God. We cannot afford to introduce something new. We cannot afford to do things according to our own desires like the children of Israel. We ought to follow explicit direction which is given by God. Amen. This is the only way to elevate the standard of God. Explicit direction of dressing, explicit direction in worship, explicit direction in singing, explicit direction in marriages, explicit direction on how we are to raise our children. We cannot afford to do things anyhow. We need to follow the counsel which God has given us. Amen. If we are to be saved. So it happens that, you know, as Moses came down from the mountain, the next day, Exodus chapter 32 verse 26, the Bible says, then Moses stood in the gate of the camp and said, who is on the Lord's side? Let him come unto me. And all the sons of Levi gathered themselves together unto him. And you know something interesting? Aaron also went on the side of Moses. Because he repented. Realized that, you know, what I've done was wrong. And he repented. And from that, the only report that we hear of Aaron is that which is good. He repented of that sin. But you know, it was on that day when 3,000 died. But Aaron repented. You know, as Joshua was dying, in Joshua chapter 24, verse 15, he gave this call to Israel. And if it seem evil unto you to serve the Lord, choose you this day whom you will serve, whether the gods which your forefathers served that were on the other side of the flood, or the gods of the Amorites, in whose land you dwell. But as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. There is a choice that we'll make in our life. Moses says, those of the Lord's side, come this side now. You know, we need to make this decision in our hearts. Which side are we going to be? This is a story which is very interesting. But it's a story which ended with a decision. The children of God went on one side, the sons of Levi. And the Bible said, you are a royal priesthood, a peculiar people, called forth to declare the praises of him that has called you out of darkness into a marvelous light. And God expects us, even at this time, that we can make a decision. Who is on the Lord's side to stand by God? Who is on the Lord's side to stand by the principles of God? Who is on the Lord's side to abide by it? Thus says the Lord. Who is on the Lord's side to remain faithful and truthful to the end until he has received the crown? This is a call of God. Amen. And as I close today, there are some of us who said, as for me, Moses made the call to the Israelites. The sons of Levi went with Moses. And as for me, I may have compromised in many things before, but it is my desire to be on the Lord's side. Some things are so hard for me to make that decision, but by his grace and by his mercy, I want to be truthful. If you are like that, I'll ask you to stand that we may pray together. We want to stand on the